Welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast series, where we address challenges and ideas for early-stage and entrepreneurial business leaders. Your host today is Dave Coffaro, President and CEO of the Greater Irvine Chamber.
Welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast. My name is Dave Coffaro, and our topic today is one that really came into everyday conversations during the COVID era. So the topic is supply chain management for businesses, and that's the network through which goods or services move from their raw material origins to the end user. And this includes every activity, every stakeholder and organization that plays a role in the creation, the production, the distribution, and the delivery of a product or service. So while supply chains have always been important to businesses, some of the disruptions over the past decade, whether it was COVID, geopolitical events, tariff strategies, have really elevated supply chain management as a strategic priority for a lot of business leaders. So with this in mind, today our guest is Richard Montellano. He's the president of RAM Supply Chain, and they're based here in Irvine. And RAM Supply Chain is a consulting firm working with manufacturers and distribution companies to help companies scale and develop competitive advantages through greater effectiveness in logistics and procurement functions. So, Richard, welcome.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me. We're excited about talking supply chain. This is our entire world, and it's amazing to help people understand how close to supply chain we all are. We're all consumers in one way, shape, or form. If we got something in our hand, whether we've eaten it, drank it, slept in it, wear it, live in it, drove it, it's got a supply chain behind it. So it's everywhere.
That pretty much covers everything within our sphere. So let's start with the basics. How would you define supply chain management for small and mid-sized businesses that may not have a dedicated logistics team in-house or have that expertise in-house?
Well, simply put, it's the coordination between the procurement, the operations, and logistics functions. It's really choreographing all of them to really reach out and satisfy your customers' needs. Too often, companies allow or make these departments work in isolation, essentially on their own islands, and miss the value of working cross-functionally. There's so much end-to-end value in understanding demands and customer needs that don't often get communicated and are not allowed to create creative solutions for the customer because they're only looking within their function, their sole function. So a procurement person might be only looking to place purchase orders, not really understanding what final delivery is. And an operations person may not truly understand what's going on at the supplier, may have better ways for them to function as well. So it's really the entire coordination from start to finish, what we call the end-to-end supply chain that includes procurement, operations, and logistics at the same time.
As you're describing that, Richard, what strikes me is this is a principle that really applies to all dimensions of business, which is don't just look at something in a silo, look at it holistically, look at the connection points and think of it from a systems perspective rather than just a thing.
Absolutely. That's the critical part. The best companies that operate at the highest levels, and it's all the great names we all know, the Amazons, the Walmarts, all of these great big companies, they are connected end to end with their customers, from understanding the demand to how they actually have last mile delivery and even some cases reverse logistics. They're very much in tune with their customers, and every point along that supply chain is designed to make that experience even better.
So I don't want to assume anything. Would you tell us what are the most pressing global and domestic supply chain challenges that you see from your practice this year?
Well, it's just quite a dynamic year. This is we're recording this on the 1st of August, 2025. Just this morning or late last night, we got the tariffs announced, latest tariffs, and tariffs have really just dominated the entire conversation for the whole year to date. Unfortunately, many of these manufacturing companies have been left trying to figure out what do they do. And unfortunately, we kind of live in a world now where we call VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that describes the supply chain in a whole. You're never going to get full clarity end to end. but you have to be agile enough to be able to deal with all of it, no matter what. So right now, the first half of the year, everybody's been talking about tariffs, and it's held a lot of companies back, paralyzed a lot of companies into making improvements, capital investments, hiring of people. They've just been waiting to see what happens, and that's been a real challenge for them this past year. So we see this year as being a tale of two halves. So that's been the first half. We think the second half we're starting to see a lot more clarity, which is going to allow companies to move forward, which is very. We're at the beginning stages of starting to see that right now. The other thing that we've been seeing a lot of, another kind of a mega trend, is the use of artificial intelligence with companies, and that's been another driving force, kind of working in the behind the scenes. But companies are starting to adopt that, and we ourselves have begun to have some conversation how to apply that into the supply chain world. So, very exciting front. But even without the AI, there's so many things companies can do, and AI is an enhancement, the cherry on top to actually take it to the next level.
You touched on this movement from ambiguity to clarity, and that's the perfect segment or connection point to go deeper into tariffs. That wasn't something that was really talked about a lot in 2023 and 4 necessarily. How have US tariff changes impacted supply chains?
Well, the first half was really difficult. Many of them didn't have good clarity and understanding, and it's unfortunate. It's not one size fits all for everybody. So every country, every commodity has a different tariff, and understand that no supply chain is the same. Everyone's different. Everybody's got different customers, different locations, different suppliers, different raw materials that they've got to buy. So every case has to be evaluated individually. And it's unfortunate. It takes a lot of time and energy to do that. But now that I think we've got some clarity, we're starting to see companies begin to move forward and start making plans to take advantage of it. They've got some really nice advantages and from a tax perspective to start moving forward, start hiring people. And I think we're going to start seeing that here in the second half. But unfortunately, it did hold a lot of companies back. And unfortunately, a lot of times when there's a little bit of chaos in the economy, people tend to hunker down. And that's exactly what we saw in the first half.
Yeah. So we're at a good point for transition, right? We're getting a little bit more clarity. The way you described it and all the different components, it sounds like you're talking about ingredients to a recipe and looking at how sourcing really creates that recipe. It's different ingredients, different costs, different tariffs from different places. For businesses that are feeling the tariff pinch right now, what are some practical steps that they can take to help mitigate those impacts?
Well, first of all, the tariffs is not something any one person or any one company can control. I would advise them to first focus on what they can control. And one of the things I learned from the Boston Consulting Group, which is one of the leading voices in the world of consulting, no matter the industry, so it doesn't matter whether you're in automotive or industrials or food or apparel or retail distribution, the supply chain often consumes 50 to 60, 70% of total revenue will go through the supply chain. So and that's an enormous impact. And not only is it an enormous impact, I look at it as an enormous opportunity. So while you might have a 10, 15, 20% increase on a specific item, there's other elements in the supply chain that you can control. And I can tell you firsthand, I can almost guarantee you, there's not one company you couldn't walk in and find some waste that you can make much more efficient to offset some of those impacts on a cost per unit basis. So you look at the entire picture, it's really opens up a whole door to opportunity is the way we look at it.
So you're analyzing each ingredient in the recipe and saying, maybe we have to pay a little more here, but we can save a little bit there and net come out the same or maybe even better. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be you alone. Remember, these are suppliers
Right.
that you're dealing with. So it doesn't have to be a one-way street. And one of the things that drives me mad is I heard a comment just this morning about companies trying to struggle with the idea, do I absorb the cost of the tariffs or do I pass it along? I think that's way too simplistic a view. There's opportunities to get better. You can share that cost. You can go to your suppliers and say, hey, we've got a 10% or a 15%. How can we work together to mitigate this increase? Can we split it half and half? Can we work together? Can we co-invest in some solution that we can find a 10, 15% savings across the line to offset it completely? There's plenty of opportunities there. It's just waiting to go after and go get it. So I think of it as being sitting there and being reactive versus going out and getting aggressive and being proactive in the process. So I'll just say last thing, I've dealt with a lot of these small to medium sized companies, and these entrepreneurs are very, very driven people. They've got a lot of fight in them, and these guys don't sit back and just take it. They want to get out and get aggressive, get ahead of it. If you can get to market better, faster, cheaper, that's a huge advantage. And you can do that unless you're just going to sit there and play the victim and say, what am I going to do? Absorb it or pass on? I think that's way too simplistic a look.
So you are definitely speaking to our audience. We're a group of entrepreneurs and business people who get out there and make it happen every day. And I like the way you said that. And I also like that you described it as it's not either or, either accept it or pass it on. There's a whole lot of space in between those two different points. So that's really valuable, actionable advice. And that in context of control what you can. And you
Yes.
can control negotiations, you can control conversations around, is there another way we can ultimately serve the end user? Under the theme of controlling things and those that we can't, pushing them aside, we often hear about reshoring or nearshoring, and it seems like there's a lot of emphasis today in the economic press around this topic. Are those viable strategies for mid-sized companies or smaller businesses, or do the costs outweigh the benefits?
Well, again, this is where not there's not one size fits all. So every company's got different needs, different commodities, different components they're buying. I wish I could say yes or no to that question, but some things are just not available. Some industries were completely driven out of the US, unfortunately. And so there's not necessarily a supplier available. That doesn't mean there's not a supplier closer to home. For example, a lot of companies have been sourcing out of China. There might be ways to find a supplier that's in Mexico, for example, or South America. And that by doing something like that, you can lower a lot of different costs. First of all, your transportation costs can go down, and also your lead times can go down. So if you're not having to hold as much inventory for something that might have to travel across the globe and take 25, 30 days to get to you, that's a real opportunity to lower your inventory cost. So you're not having to cover as much lead time. And that can be a big deal to a lot of companies. I myself personally help companies reduce the inventory, which is a great impact on their working capital. And it's just through simple ideas like that, simple fundamentals. And keep in mind, the fundamentals never go out of style, no matter the technology, no matter the industry. Focus on the fundamentals, and you're going to be all right most of the time.
Wonderful message. As you're saying that, I'm thinking back to like finance class in college and how you measure working capital and the costs of inventory and all those kinds of things. And here we are a few years later, the principle still applies. So wonderful advice. Given the global disruptions, we touched on it a little bit, things like COVID, geopolitical things. How can businesses build supply chains that are more resilient, using the term you used earlier? Build that resilience.
That's a great question, and it just takes a focus, a team that is dedicated and focused to doing that. One of the things that we often tell our clients is really build the data analytics to understand your entire need from end to end. A lot of times, these small to medium sized companies have very key people in key leadership positions and may understand the business because they've been in it for a long time. But the younger generation that's coming up doesn't have that experience, and they can't rely on that experience, of 10, 20 years in the business. They can only rely on the information that's in front of them. And without that data analytics to understand when to pivot, when to buy, when to sell, when to hold, essentially, you need that stuff built into your supply chain. That's into the operation side. For example, managing inventories. One of the biggest problems I see in small to mid-sized companies is they really struggle to manage their inventory effectively. And it balloons and gets out of control and eats up a ton of working capital for them.
So, how is AI coming to play here? Because that seems like it's an area where you could find extra stuff in the system that you can reduce from your inventory or costs or what have you.
A great question. And it's making every function along the way much more efficient. So we've been deep in some conversations with an AI partner of ours. And one of the ways we're looking to apply it is creating essentially a digital twin of the factory. So you've got your physical factory. We can replicate that digitally and run thousands of simulations to understand where the optimal flow, optimal purchase points, what the equipment is used, the flow of materials in and out of the factory, people, how to load balance things, and really understand customer demand on the front through that AI models. And it gets better and it works continuously. Me and my team have been doing this manually, essentially, for years, and it takes really a snapshot in time for us. And we can come up with some great ideas. The great thing about AI, it's continuously operating, which is much different than us. And it has the ability to essentially do this every single night, which is different than anything else any of us have ever been used to.
Yeah. Amazing the opportunities that are unfolding and how it sort of, in a sense, democratizes the ability to use data for smaller to mid-sized companies that haven't necessarily had that ability because they didn't have a staff of analysts that
Yes.
could, or they couldn't bring in BCG or someone to help
Yes.
them do the analysis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's helping even the simplest functions from, determining whether I need to place a purchase order or not, to accounts payable, to receiving information, to providing these agents that'll talk to your customer. As a matter of fact, saying, "Hey, your load is on the way. It's coming. It'll be here tomorrow."
Yeah. Interesting. What's your advice, Richard, when it comes to diversification without over complicating a business's operation?
That's a good question. And first thing I'd say is take it slow. Um, Anytime you're dealing with the supply chain, it's literally the lifeblood of most companies. So it doesn't have to be overnight. You got yourself in this situation probably over a long period of time. Take it one step at a time. Prioritize your supplier base. Understand what's the most critical to the least critical, and pick the best opportunity within there. If you got a sole source supplier that can literally shut you down, probably not a good idea to go and find a way to diversify in that one specific area. But most of these companies have dozens, if not hundreds of companies that they work with. And there's ways to find less risky suppliers to work with that can help diversify your company without taking too much risk at the same time.
Yeah. Really important point is to recognize the risk as you're working through it, but that doesn't preclude you from working through it. It just means be mindful. So great counsel. So we're coming to a close of our time together, and here's the hard question, Richard. I'm going to just ask you to distill everything that we've talked about into a couple of two or three key takeaways that you want to leave our audience with today regarding supply chain management. So what are those things?
I have four key things for
Oh,
us.
okay. All right.
So, and
Always
this
good.
this is what we call our supply chain value drivers. Most people think of supply chain as just an expense, but we think of it differently. We think of it as first as a key value driver is being able to drive cash. When you have that much control of that much cost in a company, you have an opportunity to drive efficiencies, generating much more cash flow. Secondly, we want to help them build a foundation to scale. Brute force is not scalable. Unfortunately, many people don't understand it and try to just pile more work on people. But through processes, processes help drive data, data helps drive performance. So we build those processes to create that foundation for companies. Thirdly, is the competitive advantage. If you have those two elements working for you, you can go out and create competitive advantage, whether it's cost, exclusive access, first to market, all of that kind of stuff becomes achievable. And lastly, from the supply chain, you start connecting those three dots, you can tie it right back to EBITDA, which all of a sudden you can say there's the direct line to increasing the value of the corporation from the supply chain.
I have a sneaking suspicion, Richard, that everyone listening to this podcast cares about growing their bottom line. So, really actionable thoughts. I love the way you distilled it. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise to this conversation. And for folks who want to know more, the connections, the contact information for Richard is included with today's podcast. Richard, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Dave. Have a great day. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast. To stay informed about upcoming podcasts and other important business news, please subscribe to our channel or check the Greater Irvine Chamber website.